What's good, YouTube? It's me, your boy Cody, back again with another video. Today, let's talk about Super Heavy Samurai. This is a top contender that's coming out in less than a week, and we already know that there's also a ban list dropping, so this deck's going to be very explosive once Kashira goes away. And let's talk about some of the tech choices that you guys should be considering for this deck, some of the options that maybe you guys can pick up right now while they're cheap, as well as being able to predict what might be prevalent in the metagame. These are some of the cards that might be able to counter some popular side cards or some popular things that are going to be defining the metagame. So, diving in really quick, let's talk about a card that you might see in this format, and that's Vanity's Fiend. There are some players citing this in the OCG, and I suspect that it'll be fairly popular in the TCG if people are not expecting it, because Super Heavy Samurai has a deck basically full of monsters. You look at your hand, see all monsters, all gas, and then you look at the opposing Vanity's Fiend on the other side of the table, and then you scoop up your cards because you cannot special summon. So we got to get rid of this card. A lot of decks will be siding this. I think Pirelli will definitely be siding this because they don't really rely on their normal summon. They can use their quick play spell cards to summon a bunch of the cat things or whatever the heck they are, and then they can use their regular normal summon, tribute over, summon a Vanity's Fiend, and then neither player can special summon monsters. They might have an X Purely Noir or any other purely monster that can protect the Vanity's Fiend from dying by battle or whatever the heck might happen on the field, and then you're kind of in trouble. The most glaring card that gets rid of Vanity's Fiend that comes to mind is ARCHFIEND ECCENTRICK. So this is a card that if you normal summon it, you contribute it, target a monster in the field, pop it. Or it has the also dual usage where you can put it in your Pendulum Scale as an MST to destroy another spell or trap card on the field. So if we normal summon this, we could use it as an out to Vanity's Fiend. It's decently good. The only issue with it is the existence of Purely Happy Memory, and this is a card in the Purely deck that says choose one card on the field until the end of the next turn. The first time it would be destroyed by a card effect, it's not destroyed. So if they have this set with the Vanity's Fiend, they make that setup, you go ARCHFIEND ECCENTRICK, they're going to be able to protect it. So that's kind of annoying. And there are also other cards that might get in the way. Things like Infinite Impermanence, even like Chalice or Droplet, if those are also in the metagame, that kind of stop the Eccentric from resolving. Effect Veiler, obviously. So it's a little bit dicey in that situation. I still think it's a good card to consider, but there's this other card that also came to mind. If Vanity's Fiend or Monster Floodgates are very popular, things like Fossil Dyna even, this is another card that I really like, and it's Axe of Fools. So this is a very obscure card that you might find in bulk. I know it was semi-playable maybe for an event or two in the past when the Isolde decks were good, because you could foolish this with Isolde as part of her cost because it's an equipped spell card. And what this card does is, it's similar to Axe of Despair. If you guys remember that card from Magic Ruler years ago, it says the equipped monster gains 1,000 attack. Okay, pretty cool. Also, its effects are negated. And this can be equipped to any monster on the field. Remember, guys, we can attach equipped spell cards to monsters on our opponent's side of the field. So if we attach it to a Vanity's Fiend, we're negating the effect. We're giving it 1,000 attack boost, but whatever. We're negating the effect. This is an equipped spell card which stays on our field, meaning we can continue to play with our Super Heavy Samurai cards because we don't have any spells or traps in our grave. Unless they have any way to get rid of the Vanity's Fiend, which I can't think of any reason besides something like an enemy controller, which is probably not going to be popular at all. Axe of Fools is going to be on our table. We're going to be able to play, and Vanity's Fiend is negated. They can't stop this with things like Imperm, Veiler. They can't stop it with Purely Happy Memory. It's just a really nice option for you guys to consider, and I think it's like a pseudo Infinite Impermanence that you can kind of use in Super Heavy Samurai. It also has a marginal effect where once per turn during your standby phase, inflict 500 damage to the controller of the equipped monsters. So maybe that would come up. I can't think of a single scenario where like you would pass and it pass back to you and they'd survive like to the standby phase and take the burn damage. But hey, it's just there. It's nice to have. You never know. It could happen once in 100 games. And then also being an equipped card, you could potentially boost one of your monsters by 1,000 attack just to swing for game or get over a big cranky monster that you can't take care of for whatever reason. It's very, very cool. Even something like a Fossil Dyna, you don't necessarily have to equip it to their Fossil Dyna. You could just normal summon like any Super Heavy Samurai, equip it to your Super Heavy, and then swing over it, and then, you know, you're able to play. So I just thought that was a cool little option. There are a lot of continuous spell cards, equipped spell cards that might be used to the benefit of the Super Heavy Samurai player because it's not very, it doesn't stop you from playing. The other cards I wanted to talk about, we kind of covered this in our old video, but Prohibition. This is a counter to Drone Lockbird. Drone Lockbird is very, very annoying in this deck. We can't really deal with it easily. There aren't a lot of tools to get rid of it, and if we can't search our deck, chances are we're not playing as effectively as we would like to. We're not able to put up a huge, massive end board that the Super Heavy Samurai players usually do. And the other nice thing about Prohibition is, besides being a continuous spell card that doesn't stop for plays, It's actually a direct counter to Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician. I know a lot of people have been hyping this card up. The Pendulum effect is essentially a floodgate. It says you cannot Pendulum Summon except from the extra deck. Okay, this effect cannot be negated, not really relevant. But the relevant effect here that we care about is that each player applies one of these effects based on the number of set cards in their spell and trap zone. So if they have 0, all monsters they control cannot attack or activate their effects. And obviously, if you're thinking about Super Heavy Samurai, they don't play any spell or trap cards. So if we activate this 5 Rainbow Magician, the Super Heavy Samurai player is locked under a skill drain and they cannot attack. They're essentially Mystic Mind. But the nice thing about Prohibition being a spell, as well as Axe of Fools to that extent, is you can set it on your field. And then all of a sudden, that restriction with 5 Rainbow Magician doesn't apply anymore. So we can start playing. We can do our plays. We can clear their board. After that, we can play Prohibition, flip it, and then call a card that's detrimental to their deck. If you're playing something like, against something like Branded, you could call Fallen of Albaz, and they cannot use Branded Fusion to fuse at all because all of their cards involve Fallen of Albaz as material. Shout out to Kamal actually for commenting that on my last video that we talked about Prohibition. I was like, you should hit Branded Fusion, but he's like, no, wait, you could actually hit Fallen of Albaz, and that just shuts them down equally as hard. Against an opposing Super Heavy Samurai player, maybe you could call something like Wakaushi or anything that could get rid of your board, right? Against any other decks, if you're scared of something like Dark Ruler, just call Dark Ruler. It doesn't really matter. It's really flexible. Being a spell card, we can set it into our zone, and then that turns off 5 Rainbow Magician. So if people are playing more continuous spell cards as a way to beat the metagame, then 5 Rainbow Magician just all of a sudden is not as playable as you would think it is. The other card I want to talk about is Deck Lockdown. This is like a built-in floodgate that's a continuous spell card. It says neither player can add cards from their deck to their hand except by drawing them. So it's a built-in Drone Lockbird or a built-in Mistake. It cancels off any searching. And then it also says monsters cannot be special summoned from the main deck. And then you have to destroy this during your second standby phase after activation. So it's essentially on the field for about 2 or 3 turns because you pass to your opponent, your standby phase, that's 1 turn, and then you pass again, and then the other turn, the next turn it gets destroyed. So you get like a lot of use out of this card. We really just want to stun our opponent with this card, and I think it's quite nice as a counterplay to Drone Lockbird because a lot of decks are searching this format. Like if we don't have, obviously the Super Heavy Samurai ideally will be playing Drone Lockbird and hand traps as well, but this is just another option that you could have. If your opponent Drone Lockbirds you, instead of trying to play through the Drone Lockbird, what we can do is put up a decent board like 1 negate or something if we can, and then activate Deck Lockdown. They can't play either. Pirelli cannot special summon any monsters from their deck as long as Deck Lockdown is on the table, and they cannot add either. They can't excavate, add, they can't do much of anything. They really need to lean on like making a Link 2 play somehow with some extender, but I can't really think of anything that does because all of their extenders are essentially the baby monsters that they summon from the deck. It's also fairly effective against Super Heavy Samurai mirrors. Like, they can't search anymore. They're locked under Drone Lockbird. The only bad thing is it's kind of like very volatile to things like ARCHFIEND Eccentric or anything that destroys it, and then all of a sudden it's in your graveyard. So you kind of have to hedge against that. But I like the fact that it's just like a really good option against a metagame. It stops a lot of things. You might even consider playing this, siding this in other decks that are not Super Heavy Samurai. It's just a very, very powerful card that's been forgotten. And the fact that it's a spell card means you can play it immediately, so they cannot actually do any searching on your turn. It's not like, it's a lot better than Mistake. Also, the fact that it prevents special summons from the main deck is very, very relevant. I think you guys should definitely pick up this card if you haven't already. It's quite cheap as well, and it could be a very, very powerful card in the deck right now. I know a lot of people were siding it in the Necros mirrors in the past. So yeah, guys, this is a very cool card that you can consider for sure. We talked about ARCHFIEND Eccentric already to kill out some spell and trap floodgates. The other thing that you could consider is also Mythical Beast Garuda, because this is also a pseudo MST. It's a little worse than ARCHFIEND Eccentric because you have to control no other card in your pendulum zone. And also it only targets one other spell trap on the field, destroy it, and this card, it does not destroy monsters. But it's nice because it's a level 4, so that might come up if you're playing like XYZs or like the Synchro level 8s, obviously. And it's a 1200 attack, so it's a little better than the pesky attack that's only 800 on ARCHFIEND Eccentric. The other card I want to talk about to play around Drone Lockbird is actually playing more copies of THERION King Regulus. So, a popular card that all Super Heavy Samurai players are going to be playing is Psyframe Gear Gamma. And obviously, if you're a decent player, self-respectable player, you're not going to be Drone Lockbirding on the first ad. If a Super Heavy Samurai player goes, activates Super Heavy Samurai Bike, and then you draw there and they have Gamma, you kind of probably just lose the game on the spot because your draw's getting negated, and the Super Heavy Samurai player just gets 2 free monsters on the board to make any level 8 very, very free, make XL Stardust, etc., so on and so forth. So that's why a lot of good players are going to be waiting for the draw. They're going to wait until the Super Heavy Samurai player summons a monster to the table, and then potentially, like maybe they go Wakaushi, and then they activate Benkei, and then search, and then they're going to draw there just to play around the Gamma. Well, if they're doing that, and we're playing more copies of Regulus, and we go Bike, add a Wakaushi, they don't use Droll, then if we have Regulus, we can activate Regulus, target the Bike, summon Regulus, and then we're protected by Droll. We can negate the Droll and Lockbird, right, with the Regulus. So this is like a countermeasure depending on how players play. It really depends on the metagame. If you're at like a local level at a regionals, like a lot of players might just be drolling right away on your first action. They don't really care or know about like the Gamma interaction. They don't really think about it. But if you're at like a YCS level, you know, like nationals, so on and so forth, like these good players are going to be considering every niche interaction, and they will be playing around Gamma because that's just such a blowout card. So in that aspect, then THERION King Regulus becomes a lot better because we can negate the Droll. So as long as we have a copy in our hand, we can just summon it to play around things like Droll. The only bad thing is it's a little bit bricky because we know it's a level 8 that doesn't do anything if we don't have any cards in our graveyard, and it's also only once per turn, so drawing multiple copies could be a funeral potentially. But this is just something you can consider if people are playing around Cyframe Gear Gamma. Okay, and the last card I want to talk about is a potential tech choice you can play in this card, and it's called ARCHJET LIGHTCRAFT. Huge shout out to my buddy Ali Yassine for discovering this, but this is essentially a card that says, well, there's a bunch of text, but the only part we care about is the last part, and it's a lot like Gimmick Puppet, but it says, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except Machine XYZ materials while this monster is on the field. So it's a lot like the Gimmick Puppet or the Ra's Disciple. If this is on your field, you can't really do anything. Obviously, we don't want this on our side of the field. We want to give it to our opponent as a present so they cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except Machine XYZ monsters. And given that it's a level 9, there aren't a lot of options that they could have. So, how do I get this to the opponent's side of the field? Well, it just happens that this is a level 5 or higher machine that's searchable off of Genius. So we already know like Genius is able to search out a level 5 or higher machine monster when you pendulum summon 2 or more monsters to its pointers. We can search the ARCHJET LIGHTCRAFT, and then if we have access to Super Heavy Samurai Transporter, this is a card that allows us to, first and foremost, special summon itself as an extender if we have no Spiral Traps in the graveyard, like any other Super Heavy Samurai. And then it does lock you into Super Heavy Samurai monsters for this turn, so you cannot special summon monsters. But if you have no Spell Trap cards in your graveyard, you can actually tribute this card, special summon up to 2 monsters from your hand to your opponent's side of the field, and then you draw cards equal to the number of monsters special summon this effect, and you can only use the effect once per turn. So if you have no Spell Trap cards in your graveyard, you can tribute it and then summon out the ARCHJET LIGHTCRAFT to your table. And then you can also special summon the another monster to their side of the field, and then you draw 2 cards. Obviously, you cannot do this on the turn that you special summon this from your hand because it locks you into Super Heavy Samurai monsters, but that's just an added benefit of if this is a brick in your hand, you can special summon it and then just potentially make a play. What we want to do is we want to search this off of the Super Heavy Samurai Soul Piercer and then search the ARCHJET LIGHTCRAFT off of the Genius. And then once we have that, we can special summon the Transporter either by pendulum summoning it from our hand or finding another way to special summon it onto our table. And then we can use the ARCHJET LIGHTCRAFT to be searched and then use Transporter's effect to special summon that to our opponent's side of the field, draw 2 cards, and then we're kind of in the clear. They cannot play, and they're essentially Scythe locked. Against Kashtira, they have a monster on the board and they can't special summon either. So that's just a cool little thing that I thought was very, very potentially playable in the deck. You guys be the judge of that. Let me know in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed or liked this comment already, please do so, and then let us know in the comments below what we should do, what other tech choices might be prevalent, and what things to look out for while we're playing Super Heavy Samurai. These are just some of the tech choices that I thought of, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.